everyone, and welcome to the September 17th hearing of the Historic Preservation Commission. I believe at this point, for those of you who will be testifying in today's hearing, would you please stand and be sworn in?
I do.
We will, beginning on my right, please introduce the commission members.
Hello, my name is Dominique Cobb. I am the urban planner for the Historic Preservation Commission. Good morning. Dominique Cobb. I am the urban planner for the Historic Preservation Commission.
Missy Shoecraft, Historic Preservationist.
Vivian Salaga, Preservation Architect.
Tom Placon, Archaeologist, University of South Florida.
Thank you. Dennis, at this point in the agenda, do you have any announcements?
Good morning, Commissioners. Dennis Fernandez, Architecture Review and Historic Preservation Manager. Just one brief announcement. We do currently have a cycle for the Interstate Historic Preservation Trust Fund grant program that's accepting applications. Our deadline is October 2nd. This was the program that I presented to you at our last meeting. Any individuals that are interested in learning more about that program can contact our office at the number below, 274-3100 option 3, or visit our website where all the program documents are located. So it's a great program. Hopefully anyone in the community that can benefit from that will take advantage of it. And that does complete my announcements for this morning. We can move on to the review of the minutes.
Have the commissioners had an opportunity to review the minutes, and do they have anyone have any comments? Noting that, may I have a motion to accept the minutes as written?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes are adopted.
Thank you. Moving on to our first presentation this morning. It is the consideration for local historic landmark designation for the Giunta Homestead and Farm located at 2401 East 11th Avenue. I did want to just briefly introduce the process to you that we're engaged in. It is dictated under sections 27, 256 and 257, which is the landmark designation process. I believe that Ms. Peterkin has given some sample motions for you when the time of forming the motion does come about, so that will assist you in making the motion. Your role here today is to make a formal recommendation to City Council as to how the subject property does satisfy the criteria for landmark designation within our code. And the staff report should help you along the way in making your motion. In anticipation that there is a affirmative recommendation to City Council, prior to that being scheduled on their agenda for 2 public hearings, it will be forwarded to the Hillsborough County Planning Commission for a staff review and a recommendation as to how the designation would conform to the Tampa Comprehensive Plan. So that just gives you a little bit of oversight of your role within the process this morning, and Elaine's going to now come up and give you a presentation of a PowerPoint. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. Elaine Lund, Historic Preservation staff. So please let me know when that's up on your monitors. You ready? Okay. So this morning we're here, as Dennis stated, to consider the local historic landmark designation of the Giunta Homestead and Farm located at 2401 East 11th Avenue in Ybor City. This item was added to the Historic Preservation Commission's work plan on July 16th of this year. So today we're here to consider it for recommendation to City Council. So the Giunta Homestead and Farm takes up almost an entire block between 24th Street and 25th Street on the south side of 11th Avenue and the north side of 10th Avenue on the east side of Ybor City. You can see on these maps that show the different historic district boundaries that the green line, which runs through the Giunta's property, that's the National Historic Landmark District line, and it essentially bisects the property. So a portion of the Giunta's homestead and farm is in the National Historic Landmark District boundaries, and the remainder of the farm property, excuse me, is excluded from this district. Excuse me. The red line that runs all the way over to 26th Street to the east there, that's the local historic district boundary. So this property is included in the city's local historic district. Our maps for the local historic district indicate which buildings in particular are included within the district and which ones are considered to be contributing, those shown in the gray, and the non-contributing ones in the white there. So you can see that the Giunta's house is considered to be contributing. However, there is not really anything given in the way of consideration for the remainder of the property. So in the early 1900s, the city of Tampa was in the process of growing. This is the 1903 Sanborn Map. That's the fire insurance map was paid for at the time by the city to sort of inventory all of the buildings in the city, and it helped bring the city's insurance rates down if they had certain certain number of buildings, ratio of buildings that were less flammable or inflammable rather, and the notes on this page, the key map here for the Sanborn Map, they also talk about the population, the fire department, the water resources, things like that. So kind of gave a good overview for insurance adjusters. The different colors on this map represent the different individual pages where you could go within the Sanborn insurance books to see in more detail of the buildings that were in those areas. So you see that the farthest on the east side there, one of the last pages in the Sanborn map book for that year, sheet 33, and that page ends around 22nd Street. So the area that was beyond 22nd Street to the east was not included in this inventory at that time. Now that doesn't necessarily mean there wasn't anything there, but there was not a concentration of structures beyond that line at that point that was really worth considering for the spread of fire and other concerns like that. In fact, that area was largely agricultural at that time. In 1907, as we get into the Giunta's family story, the Salvatore and Vittoria Giunta, with two of their 5 children who lived in Santo Stefano Cascina, Sicily, decided to immigrate to the United States. And they were having a rough time. The political and economic conditions were not very good. They had heard from many of their relatives and friends from the same village that there were opportunities in the U.S. and particularly in Florida and a couple of different towns, in Tampa and Ybor City, and also in, I believe, St. Cloud, that there were lots of opportunities for laborers to come, and that they were very well paid. And this was, would be a large improvement from their current living conditions. So they were able to get together enough money to bring the parents and some of the children, but not all of them, with them. And later in 1911, after the family had earned a little bit of money working here in Ybor City, the father was able to return to Sicily to bring back the other children in the family. So it was a sort of a, not only a long process for just thinking about raising the money to take the voyage over, but also to make sure that the entire family was together. So the Jinja settled on the east side of Ybor City near the celery fields and the other fields that were in that area, and not in the same area where most of the cigars factory workers lived. In fact, this photo shows you, this is taken, I believe, from the top of the Florida Brewery. So you've got, I think 13th Street is sort of the diagonal road where they've overwritten the industrial department and Seaboard Airline Railroad there. So we're looking sort of northeast over the densely populated area of Ybor City. And you can see all the factories, all the little cottages for the worker housing in there. Some of at that time they still had some of the boarding houses where single men would come over and stay in these factories. You can see the rail lines on the right side of the picture that would come up from, I believe this is probably the Atlantic Coastline Railroad there on that side, maybe not. This one ran south of the Florida Brewery and then eventually ran along 6th Avenue into Ybor City. So the area where the Sicilian families lived was much to the east of this, and it was definitely not the busy, densely populated part of Ybor City. In fact, in 1907, though, things were getting even busier in the Ybor City area. In 1906, the Tampa Tribune reported that the prior year, in 1906, over $1 million had been spent in building and construction in Tampa, which was almost twice as much as in 1905. So this was a time of great growth for the area. Business revenues were also up, and they reported that 50 million more cigars had been produced in Tampa and Ybor City than in the year prior. So it was definitely a sort of a boom time there. The city was also busy anticipating the dredging of the Ybor estuary to allow boats that required a greater depth to be able to come into the port there. And then this is a photo of one of the celery fields that was made into a postcard. It's just outside of Tampa. It looks very much like it could be just outside of Ybor City, in fact, in the area where the Sicilian families eventually lived. You can make out in the picture there are some brick buildings in the background that look very much like cigar factories, and a water tower or two. There was a gentleman, a prominent physician in the city of Tampa, who sort of dabbled in celery growing on the side, and eventually he became much more interested in farming because he made a good deal of money doing it. So he owned a large celery field in this area outside of, I guess it was considered to be East Ybor at that time. It was sort of between 8th Avenue and 11th Avenue and 23rd Street and 28th Street. This area was close to several springs which flowed through the open ditches and could flood the fields, providing all the water that the celery crops in particular needed. Watercress was also a very big crop at that time, but these crops were loaded onto the rails. The Atlantic coastline and this seaboard coastline both had lines running through this area from the port and then further north and east at that time. So the celery in particular was very popular in the northern cities. Dr. Douglas also had other celery farms in other areas, particularly in Manatee County. And he built his own irrigation and drainage systems, some of which is still, in fact, present under the Giunta farm today. So this photo from 1912, slightly enhanced. This is produced by the Board of Trade. And see at the bottom that it's Tampa, Florida, the city with the payroll. They did have a pretty large payroll for the at the time, largely because of all the production from the cigar companies and the number of people who were paid on a weekly basis there. So the future site of the Giunta Homestead and Farm, there's approximately a little bit to the east of where the Ybor Channel was, where that was dredged. And you can see the shipping. They've got little boats coming in and out of the channel there. You can see the ports and the rail lines along Seddon Island and along Hooker's Point. So this is the Sanborn Map from 1915, and you can see that at that time, still the few blocks right around the future site of the Giunta Homestead and Farm, they're still shown in white. There's not a page that shows any concentration of structures on that area at that time. You can see that there's definitely some buildings. The development is sort of encroaching its way in there, though. Dr. Douglas started selling off his property in the 1920s, and around this time, the Giunta family, they lived just a couple of blocks to the north of the location where their house is now. The newspaper real estate records from 1923 show that the Giuntas purchased some of their property along 11th Avenue at that time from Dr. Douglas. And as the years went on, the family acquired more land. They began, when they settled in Ybor City, they were able to farm just a little bit of plot on the house, the small house where they lived. But as they bought the land on 11th Avenue, they were able to farm there. Eventually, they were able to save money and save up their money and construct the house that is there now, and that was built in 1924. With all the land that they were fortunate to be able to buy, they had their farm field, they could have their chickens, they could have their outdoor oven, and they were able to become much more self-sufficient than they had in their early years in Ybor City, and far more self-sufficient than they were in their life in Sicily. The family, they worked a variety of jobs. They were a very, very hard-working family. From the oral history interviews and the family records that I've read, they worked everything from Salvatore even laid some railroad tracks in his early years in coming to Ybor City. The women mostly worked in the cigar factories, and the sons would, they would work in the factories. They would help out on the farm. They would sell the produce. There were several children at that time who would act as street peddlers, and they'd take a cart of the produce and take it by the factories, sell to the workers as they were getting off their shifts in the early afternoon, and continue to sell the produce to door to door throughout the rest of the neighborhood for all the families who, like the Cuban and Spanish families in the area who did not have their own homes and lived in that more densely packed area of Ybor City. So this is the Sanborn Map from the 1920s, 1926 corrected through 1929. So this is the first Sanborn Map that shows the Giunta family house, and it's there with the same footprint in the same location where it is today. The yellow indicates that it was the wood frame structure. was built in the Craftsman style. It's a very, very nice example of the Craftsman style. You can also see on the property then that they did have a sort of an outbuilding, like a garage in the back. That one was a wood frame. There was another one built later that's masonry, which is the existing garage and accessory building that's on the site today, but in the same location. So Salvatore passed away in 1930 and left the homestead and farm in the hands of his wife and sons. Since they had amassed quite a bit of land, one of the things that Victoria, who had been made the executor of the estate, she was generous and was able to deed portions of the property to her sons as they married. So the youngest son in the family, Dominic Valenti Giunta, he was deeded a portion of this property, but he never built a house on it, unlike one of his brothers. In fact, he stayed in the family home with his mother to help with the farm. In 1941, he married Sarah Gullo, and you can see in these pictures here, the photo on the right is the picture of their wedding. The other photo is a picture from 1935 with Victoria and her children. So in the 1920s, this is the Sanborn Map, a one closer image of the area. In 1931, you can see there's still not much development in the area. In 1951, and there's a little more construction going on. 1976, there's still, not a lot of development in some of these areas, and particularly, I think these were the areas that had the large drainage ditches coming through. There was a very large spring at, I think, 17th Avenue and 30th Street, just to the northeast there, that produced an enormous amount of water that came through. So today, this is the site for the Giunta Homestead and Farm. You can see where the house is. You can see where the 1951 garage is. The greenhouse and the chicken coop are shown on this map. The area to the east of the house and the buildings is the field where the crops are grown. To the south, there's an orchard which has, I believe, pecan and various fruit trees. So this is a photograph of the house from about 1949. And you can see that it is very much the same today. There's a sign outside the property there in 1949 that was indicating Dominic's services as a tax preparer and notary, in addition to his full-time job of teaching and his other full-time job of working the farm. And then this is the 1951 garage during its construction. The garage has a portion for laundry facilities and a portion for storage. The sons had a plumbing business, and a lot of the storage for the plumbing business was kept in this garage on site. There were some other structures on the farm, like this windmill, which is built in 38, and there's a picture of it finished in 1940. The windmill was very tall and had this very large cypress water tank, which was used to irrigate the farm. The photo to the right from 1949 shows the chicken, the chicken coop that was there at the time, and there's some chickens having their dinner. So there are other auxiliary structures on the farm that were not present during the what we usually think of as the historic period, which would be generally 50 years ago. There's the present day chicken coop, and there's also a greenhouse on the site. they don't meet our usual standard of being historic. However, these types of auxiliary structures sort of came and went on the property, and they are representative of the continued agricultural use and the overall history of the site. So we're considering them to be contributing to the property. And as the property is still in its, serves its original use and function and maintains its overall historic appearance, we've recommended in the staff report that the period of significance for this property be from circa 1920 to present day. So we have just a few pictures of the farm and the family over the years, with some of the produce that was there. There were the children helped on the farm a lot. The Jinja family still, in fact, uses the same tractor that's shown in that the picture on the bottom in the center there. And this is a more recent picture, the top center, I believe, from 2011, showing the crops being farmed very much in the same manner that they were in the early history of the farm. This is an aerial photo of Ybor City from 1938. And I wanted to show this one just because this is one of the photos that I found where the area even east of the Giunta property isn't cut off in the photograph, but there's kind of a lot going on here. You can see the Ybor Channel sort of to the southwest of the property there. The Tampa Union Station is in the very bottom left corner. So you can follow the railroad tracks leading from the passenger station, intersecting with the lines that would come off to go down to the port. And then you can see on the east side of the channel, there are a lot more facilities, industrial facilities for the port down there. You can see all the little spurs that would kind of come out and feed into the larger rail lines to carry goods up north. You can also see fairly clearly that the more densely packed areas, the street just to the west of the Giunta property is 24th, and you can see the building sort of it's very, very dense up to 22nd and continues a little bit over to 24th, but it's fairly clear that even in 1938, that was still not a densely populated area. These aerials show the change in Ybor City from the 50s and the introduction of the interstate in the 60s, and then the urban renewal activities of the 1970s there. The Ybor City urban renewal area, its eastern boundary was 22nd Street, and that's very clearly demarcated in this aerial photograph by all the vacant land to its west there. The Giunta property was east of this, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the neighborhood on the east side of 22nd continued to prosper as it had. There was, of course, some fallout from the overall economic decline of Ybor City, and the introduction of the interstate wiped out quite a few of the other Sicilian families. I think that there were dairies in particular that were on the north side of that neighborhood. And these are some of the more recent photographs. The farm and the house. Its continued operation. It's looking back east. There's the garage from 1951. It's another view of the garage. There in the chicken yard. Got the chicken yard and the chicken coop to your right. This is the greenhouse. And a view of the orchard. And then the chickens are, of course, still thriving on the farm today. So this is a wonderful three-dimensional map that Dominic Sr. and Dominic Jr. put together. Dominic Sr. being Salvatore's and Victoria's son. It's oriented so that north here is to your left, but this represented all the different properties that played a role in the development of this area east of 22nd Street. So we've got the it indicates where the dairies were, where the homesteads were, where some of the bakeries were, and the major rail lines. I believe the church, the Most Holy Name Catholic Church, is shown on this map. Some of the produce companies, the floral company. There's a part that indicates where the first farmers market in Ybor City was, and this was a interesting thing that sort of grew up out of the first Seminole trading post being located very close to this site as well in this area. So, in the early days of Ybor City, the Seminoles would come to trade their crops for cigars or whatever else the cigar factory workers had to offer, and this sort of idea of trading post, maybe not directly turned into the farmers market, but it's very similar concept, and very interesting that those occurred in the same area, where people from the cigar factories could come to get their produce, or where other people throughout the city could come to get their goods from the farmers market, from the produce and other items that were produced in this part of Ybor. So leading into the summary here, the 1924 house, it's the Giunta family home. It's an excellent example of this craftsman style of the homes in the 1920s found throughout Ybor City. One particularly interesting item for this house is that it does have a room in the back that sort of known as the back room, or the family room, we might call it today, a less formal room where the family would gather than the front rooms. And this is a little different from what you would normally see in most bungalows throughout the city. And typically they would have the formal front rooms and then the bedrooms, and that was about it. But the Jinja homestead and farm, not only the house, but the farm overall, as you've seen, continues to convey its historic purpose and appearance. So the homestead and farm is a very excellent and rare surviving example of the early Sicilian immigrant family homestead and farm in Ybor City. And as stated, the site's history extends beyond its ownership by the Giunta family, as it was part of the former large celery field owned by Dr. Douglas, and it was located within a few blocks of the Seminole trading post there. So the Giuntas have indicated and shown me photos of the cypress irrigation system that was put in place by Dr. Douglas. So it's very interesting to see that this area, which it's only been used for agricultural purposes generally, it's been largely untouched by development. So there's likely still quite a bit to learn from what's underneath the topsoil there. And then getting more to the kind of reason why we're here talking about this particular property. Again, as you saw at the beginning, the homestead and farm is located entirely within the local district boundaries, but it's bisected by the National Historic Landmark District boundary, which excludes the farm. The Sicilian immigrants' farms and other other properties that were in the neighborhood, like the dairies, were not, they weren't called out as a significant resource type in the initial local and national designation reports. Obviously, the residents of this part of Ybor served a large purpose in the development of Ybor, and they provided the sustenance for a considerable number of people there. So the local landmark designation of the Giunta Homestead and Farm would honor this legacy and provide enhanced protection of the property as a whole. So the staff's recommendation is that the Giunta Homestead and Farm be recommended to City Council for the local landmark designation, and our Historic Preservation Commission ordinance refers to the criteria that you have to consider for significance for landmark designation. We have the period of significance, which in the report states from about 1920 to present, and then you're also required to consider the items that are the National Register criteria. So staff feels that this particular property is significant in under criterion A in the areas of agriculture and ethnic heritage, criterion C in the areas of architecture and community planning and development, and criterion C in the area of historic archaeology. And with that, I'm available if you have any questions. I believe we have some members in the audience who would also like to speak before we, actually, the owners of the property, I believe, would like to speak before we move into public comment. So I'd like to invite them forward at this time. Excuse me.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Victoria Giunta, and I live at 2401 East 11th Avenue. We are often asked what changes have occurred on the farm over all these years. So today I thought I'd concentrate on that and share some of this background information. Just as the generations have changed in the Giunta Homestead and Farm, so have the methods and different ways of farming and cultivation on the farm. Farming has evolved from a hand cultivation process to mechanical cultivation. This was to reduce the amount of labor. Originally, our grandfather, Salvatore, like his neighbors, used some basic garden tools to work the farm. And these were like shovel, garden rake, garden hoe. The goal was to create furrows, and from these furrows, create raised rows for planting. In later years, cultivation methods changed when our grandfather hired a farmer who owned a mule and a plow to cultivate or plow the land for him. This annual task of plowing was usually done in the fall when the rains had subsided. After the ground was plowed, it was ready for our grandfather to begin the process of forming the rows by hand. Once the rows were created, compost was placed down the center of each row, and this compost was placed for the entire length of the row. And following that, seeds were sowed on either side. This method of planting seeds still continues today. Improvements came about slowly. In the 1940s, our father purchased a gasoline-powered tiller to help prepare the land. Though it was an improvement, it did not provide the power needed to till and cultivate the land and was not very reliable. This was used for several years until 1950, when our father purchased a McCormick Farmall Cub tractor that had implements and attachments for plowing, disking, cultivating, and forming rows. We are proud to say that the same tractor is still in use today. Irrigation on the farm also underwent changes due to changes in the environment. And this resulted that in the 20s and 30s, irrigation was originally subterranean. This irrigation system was driven by several small artesian springs that ran throughout the East Ybor area, including our farm. Water from these springs flowed into a network of ditches and underground cypress boxes that irrigated the farm. By the late 1930s, a few of the artesian springs began to dry out. Due to these changes, in 1939, our father hired a company to put in a well deep enough to supply water for irrigation. He also purchased a 60-foot windmill, which was installed directly over the well. The purpose for the windmill was that during those times of strong winds, the water would be pumped directly from the well into the canals and ditches in the field. Whenever the wind subsided, then the water was pumped into a large wooden reservoir that was near the top of the windmill. The water was stored in the reservoir, and then during the dry spells, it was used to irrigate the farm. In later years, the wooden reservoir deteriorated and began to be a problem. The wind power was not sufficient, we found, to pump the water for all the irrigation that was needed. The windmill was sold in the early 1960s. At that point, our father had an electric well pump installed. The well was connected to an underground system of pipes beneath the soil that provided irrigation by overhead sprinklers. This same system is used today. There have been many challenges to the longevity of our farm over the years. Interstate 4 created a man-made barrier that impacted the community and had a negative environmental impact on the land and the natural flow of spring water. Some of the spring water originated from Oak Springs and meandered through ditches, creeks, and swales throughout East Ybor. Environmental changes have directly impacted us. The rain we now experience is more intense and destructive and has caused some occasional flooding on the farmland, forcing us to build our rows higher prior to sowing seeds. The growing season is now shorter due to the extended heavy rainfall that sometimes continues into the fall season. Increases in temperature and periods of severe drought have taken their toll on the land. Even with overhead irrigation, we cannot completely overcome these negative environmental changes. Today, we continue to farm by working within the confines of what nature will allow us to do. We believe the Giunta Homestead and Farm should be considered for our City of Tampa local historic landmark designation because it reflects not only the history, culture, and architecture of Ybor City, but also the strong agrarian roots of this early immigrant community. Thank you for allowing me to share some of our early farm history.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak?
My name is Beatrice Giunta, and I reside at 2401 East 11th Avenue. I would like to read a quotation to you from Facing History and Ourselves. People make choices, and choices make history. When our grandparents, Salvatore and Victoria Giunta, chose to come to America from Sicily, little did they know that their decision would have an impact for many generations. Upon their arrival, they found work and saved their earnings. After several years, they chose to use their meager savings to purchase land and to begin a farm and to build their home. As a farm family, all worked on the farm for the betterment of the family. Our grandparents' farm was an effort of love and a way of life that they passed on to their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. One of their children, Dominic V. Giunta, our father, chose to continue to work the farm after the death of his father and mother, while also working full-time as an educator. Our brother, Dominic G. Giunta, began working on the farm at an early age alongside our father. When our brother, who also was an educator, married, he began his own small farm at his home in Lutz, Florida, and he chose to continue assisting our father at the homestead and farm until his death in 2004. The Giunta homestead and farm exists today because of choices that were made. Those choices allowed an early part of Ybor City history to be captured in time. So today, we ask the Historic Preservation Commission to support a City of Tampa local historic landmark designation for the Giunta homestead and farm due to the contributions it has made by documenting, preserving, and creating a better understanding of early Ybor City history. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Commissioners, as we get into public comment, I think some individuals came in after the swearing, so I believe we'll do that one more time. For anyone in the audience who's going to be speaking today, if you could just stand and raise your right hand.
Yes.
Thank you. Public comment now or questions from the commission? All right. Commissioners, anyone have questions of the staff? All right.
Can I, real quick, this is just kind of a technical issue, but it's going to be an RA under criteria D. Has it been recorded with the Florida Master Site File as an archaeological site?
Elaine Lund, Historic Preservation Staff. I do not believe that it has. No, the house has been, but there's not an
Might
archaeological
just be
form associated.
something to do.
Yes. Thank you.
Interesting perspective. We don't
Yeah.
often get those.
Just on that, as you get into your deliberations, that could be a condition to the approval?
I don't necessarily need to make it a condition. I just think it
Yeah.
would be. I mean, the rationale for criterion D is not particularly well developed in the statement, but I'm not taking exception to it because I think there's an interesting angle there.
Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak at this time? Please come forward.
Hi, I'm James Wilson. I live at 2224 11th Avenue, kind of one block and a half catty corner to them, and I've known them 10 years, and they're a great asset, the sisters and the farm and the property, and it'd be great to some type of protection to stop some of the sprawling development. They're just building a lot of houses, so I offer my support, and thanks for your time and effort being here.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Chris Vella. I live at 9241 half East 11th Avenue. That's Tampa and Ybor City, historic. So we're in a neighboring district. I urge you to recommend the City Council to put the Giunta Homestead and Farm under the local historic landmark designation. It's very critical. 11th Avenue, as you know and you saw in the photos, has been disrupted by urban renewal as well as with the interstate work. So we have some very few treasures that we just need to preserve. And part of, I believe, East Ybor's concerns is about identity just as much as Ybor, historic Ybor itself. And we know that there's a lot of value to preserve those key cultural and moving like pieces of property and land that help build our city, help build Ybor City. So as a far west resident on 11th Avenue, I do support this to be under local landmark designation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commission. My name is Roger Grunke. I'm a preservation architect, reside at 2708 North Elmore in Tampa Heights. I'd like to go on record this morning in support of the designation of the Giunta farm as a local historic landmark. I think this property lends itself to the potential of many historic programs, activity programs in the future. Before these programs can be established, however, the property must be designated so that there is a base for activities to emanate from. The importance here is that not only do we have the potential of a important landmark, but it's a living landmark. It's not a shell. And for this reason, I fully support the designation.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak?
Good morning. My name is Jose Quillon. I'm the current president of the Historic East Ybor and Gary Neighborhood Association. And about 5 weeks ago, we actually had a meeting. We had about 25 residents that came. The Giunta sisters did a presentation that was really received by all the residents. I think as much as we love them and their property, I think this is one of the biggest things for our neighborhood. I believe it's the first property that, Dennis may correct me if I'm wrong, that would ask for this designation. So we're really excited about this. We definitely love having their, like the architect was mentioning, it's living history. It's not something that we look at. It's not a statue. It's something that we really get pleasure by just learning from. So I think the Neighborhood Association is fully in support of the designation of a local landmark. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing portion. Oh, wait.
Just wanted to mention that you did receive 22 letters of support. Those are in your packets as well. So that does, contribute to demonstration of the level of community support for what's proposed before you today.
Is it necessary to make a motion to receive and file of those letters?
Please.
May I have a motion, please, to receive and file?
Move to receive and file the letters.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, the motion passes to receive and file the packet of letters of support that were presented in our packages this morning. And now we will close the public hearing portion. If there are no further comments or questions from any of the commissioners, could we please, I'd like to request someone to take a stab at making a motion. In our packages, we have some suggested language from the attorney's office to craft the basis of the motion.
Commissioner Cobb, I move that we recommend the City Council that the Giunta family homestead and farm be designated a local historic landmark because it meets the criteria established in Tampa Code Section 27-257 as recommended by staff. Specifically because of the nature it contributes to the city of Tampa and its historic immigration and all of the agriculture needs that I believe should be preserved.
We need to identify specifically the
Okay.
designation criteria there.
The application designation criteria, I would say A. Property is associated with events that have made a significant contribution to the broad patterns of our history, especially with the Sicilian migration over here into.
Criteria C.
All right.
You gotta keep going.
Okay. Property embodies the distinctive characteristic of a type, period, or method of construction of represents the work of a master, possession high artistic value, or represents a significant and distinguished entity whose component lacks individual distinction. Also D, property has yield or is likely to yield information important in prehistoric or history.
And criteria D.
She just
She
read that.
just did D, sorry.
And also the national criteria, A, C, and D. Did I do that? All right.
Is there a second to that motion?
Sorry.
I'll second.
We have 2 seconds.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Congratulations. We will make now the recommendation goes to,
The recommendation will be forwarded to the Hillsborough County Planning Commission staff, and then there'll be 2 public hearings that are scheduled before City Council that will be noticed public hearings as well. I do have one point of order that I need a little assistance on. Typically, under our designation process for local landmarks, those do go under the jurisdiction of the Architecture Review Commission. However, in the past, when we have designated structures within the Ybor City Historic District, because the Barrio Latino Commission does have jurisdiction over that area, we would request that you make a follow-up motion so that the oversight of the property is delegated to the Barrio Latino Commission in place of the Architecture Review Commission.
all right. Would someone make that motion?
Could you just summarize that one more time? I'm ready to make a motion, but I'm not sure I caught it all.
I think I could do it.
I think your motion would say the form that the Barrio Latino Commission would have the oversight authority on this particular property in place of the Architecture Review Commission.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion that the Barrio Latino Commission have oversight of this property rather than the Architectural Review Commission.
All those in favor of that motion signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Excellent.
And I did want to just take a moment to thank the Giunta family as a whole, both Vicki and Tessie and their family. They provided us an immense amount of information and photographs, which are obviously very valuable. They're family treasures, in which we were able to scan and then be able to archive those for the future within the city archive. So I know it's a celebratory feeling for this to move forward, but at the same time, our need to document and for the future plays a significant role in how we manage these types of cases. So thank you very much.
Are we to assume that the photographic documentation is more extensive than what we were presented here?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Yeah, we were able to scan a great number of photographs that are provided to us, and we incorporated the ones that were relevant to the presentation in the designation report, which obviously also gets archived. But.
Excellent. All right. Let's go.
Yes, I would like to say thank you so much for carrying this ball for a very long time, and it certainly honors your family. I also wanted to underscore my support for Mr. Grunke's comments about making this something that it could be used for educational purposes. And whatever support we can lend, or I'm speaking for myself here, to help that process along, because while I've certainly heard this presentation a couple times, and maybe I wasn't paying as close attention as I should have, the last couple times I was it was interesting to me to hear about the spring, for example. So there's sort of a cultural landscape in this area that isn't just focused on buildings, but development patterns and the Seminole Trading Post and all these things that, even though I've lived in Tampa for a long, long time, this is new to me, unfortunately. And so I just feel like whatever we can do to underscore that particular part of our history, we seem to focus on the buildings a lot, if we could expand it. So thank you, Mr. Brunke. That was a wonderful comment.
I don't know if this is a perfect time to mention this, but maybe staff might consider, there is a National Register category for traditional cultural properties, and this is one that would seem to fit the bill.
For sure.
Yeah, there's a strong cultural landscape component here, so.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Would you like to repeat your comment about the archaeological?
No, that's it.
No? Oh, okay, all right.
I think the,
Just as
there's clearly a good archaeological component there. The irrigation system sounds interesting, so it's something worth including in the nomination. So
Okay. Thank you all very, very much. Next on our agenda is the item 7, the redesignation of to contributing status of a property in Tampa Heights, which has been relocated.
Commissioners, Elaine Lund, Historic Preservation staff. At this time, I'm going to give another PowerPoint presentation regarding the redesignation of 602 East Francis Avenue in the Tampa Heights Historic District. Is that up on your screens at this time? Okay. So the house that is now located at 602 East Francis Avenue was formerly located just one parcel to the east at 604 East Francis Avenue. This is in the Tampa Heights Historic District, and this building has been considered a contributing structure. So this is the house as it sat on the site, one parcel over at 604 East Francis. This particular parcel was purchased by the Florida Department of Transportation, so it is in their right-of-way for the, it's sort of located near the intersection of, Interstate 4 and Interstate 275. So there are, as I think we all know, plans for improvements in that area. So this house was put up for sale by the Department of Transportation, and the current owners purchased it, and a condition of that agreement was that they relocate it one parcel to the west to 602 East Francis, and the agreement also included that not only did the new owners get the house, they also got the parcel at 602 East Francis. So this house has been moved. It's now sitting at 602 East Francis, and this is the historic district map there showing the house in its original location near the intersection, and the site where it was located, and then this property just to the west where it has been moved. This is the 1915 Sanborn Map showing the original site in red and the relocation site in green. The house that was located there at the corner on the relocation site was demolished in the 1990s, so it's been a vacant site for some time. You can see on the 1915 Sanborn Map that the house was pretty much then in the same footprint as it is today. So it's got a wraparound porch on the south and east sides. There's an open porch on the rear, and the little kitchen winged on the rear as well. And this is our 2019 aerial map showing the original site in red and the relocation site in green. And you can see very clearly here the proximity to the interstates. So this is on the photo on your left here shows the relocation site before, a vacant lot, and the relocation site after, once as the building was being moved onto the site. This is, let's see, the relocation was approved by the Architecture Review Commission on January 7th, 2019. And at this time, the ARC also approved the rehabilitation of the structure and an addition to the north and the east sides to expand the building for the family that will live in it. This house, it's not a large house. It doesn't have elaborate architectural details on it, but it is a one-story structure built around 1910 that exhibits some of the pre-classic Queen Anne style elements. That's not as highly ornamented as some of the other Queen Anne styles. It incorporates some of the classical revival elements into it. But the structure, you don't see it in this picture, but it was sitting and is again sitting on a pier foundation. It has a hipped roof with the front-facing gable, and the current window fenestration has replacement aluminum windows throughout mostly. I think there was still one original wood window in the house before it was moved, but the rehabilitation plans call for the windows to be replaced with wood windows. You'll also see in these pictures that at this time the wraparound porch was removed during the relocation. The porch will be reconstructed as well as part of the approved plans. So the action today here, since this property was relocated, it needs to be redesignated as a contributing structure in the historic district, and we are considering this under criterion A and for community planning and development, and criterion C for architecture. So if you have any questions at this time, I'm happy to answer them. The owners are not present today, but they did fill out the application, and we've been working closely with them on the rehabilitation.
Questions?
Yes, I have a question in regards to the land use. Will this, I know you did state that a family will be living in it. Will it be the family that owns it, or would it be a rental property?
It will still be a single family residence. As far as what I've been told by the applicant as far as their intentions is that they intend to live there. Whether or not it becomes a rental property, that's something that we cannot relegate through either this board or the Architectural Review Commission.
Any other questions?
Just one. Elaine, I'm curious when we talk about the approved addition on the north and the east sides, will that addition be visible from the roadway or from off-site?
Portions of it may be visible from the streets. This property is on the corner, so it has two street frontages there. Bearing in mind that sort of to the east, there's nothing left on that block other than the properties owned by the vacant lots now that are owned by the Department of Transportation. It wouldn't have any impact in that direction. Also, across the street, I didn't note this before, it is the Tampa Heights Community Garden. So that's there are residential structures directly to the west on the other side of Grove, and I believe the property just to the north of this lot is still vacant.
Okay.
You really cannot see the addition from Francis, but when you go around the corner to Grove, then you see the...
You may. It will not extend past the rear setback of what was already there, the kitchen wing. So this did go through the ARC review process and was approved for that. Additionally, the applicants are applying for the ad valorem tax exemption for historic properties, so that is being reviewed in accordance with the Secretary of the Interior standards.
Thank you.
Well, I, for one, can say that I'm very happy that this house has been relocated and moved. I'm have been very involved in the community garden for years, and watching that poor little house deteriorate over time has been pretty sad, wondering if anyone was going to do something with it, and we're very happy that someone has taken the initiative to do this. So is there anyone from the public who would like to make a comment on this application? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing portion of this application. And are there any further questions from any commissioners on this property? Then, again, there is may we have a motion for this piece of property?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to approve the application for redesignation of contributing status for the property now located at 602 East Francis Avenue, and that staff be directed to update the official Historic District building inventory and related map to reflect such status, as it has been shown that the property meets the criteria set forth in the Tampa Code Section 26-261, specifically.
27.
Oh, I'm sorry. Tampa Code Section 27-261. Specifically, it meets the designation criteria A, which states the property is associated with events that have made significant contribution to the broad patterns of our history. Criteria C, the property embodies the distinctive characteristics of a time period or method of construction, and represents the work of or processes of high artistic values.
I second that.
All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Now, here's my agenda. We are now at item 8. Dennis, you were going to update us on the Ybor City District Guidelines update.
Yes. Thank you, Commissioners. Did want to provide another update. I've been keeping this item on the agenda because it is a significant goal of ours to update the guidelines in Ybor City. And since I last updated you, we did have the need to somewhat formalize the expenditures that are involved with the hiring of the consultant. So in working collaboratively with the Ybor City Development Corporation, at their past meeting, their board did commit to funding $40,000 for the revision process. We needed that formalization to be able to move through the advertising with our contract administration division. We've narrowed our options down to 5 firms, which will now, that we have the funds in place, be able to request a letter of interest from them. So we'll be doing that in the next couple weeks, and hopefully by the next meeting, I'll be able to come back to you with our selected consultant for the revision process, and a little bit more of a distinct timeline for when we'll be engaging not only the public, but the other board members in collaboratively designing the format for the guidelines. So just a very brief update to that, but as I said, it is a significant goal of ours, and I did want to extend my appreciation to Courtney Orr at the Ybor City Development Corporation staff and the board for committing those funds. We're going to use those in addition to funds that I have in my particular budget for next fiscal year to make sure that we are adequately funded for this project. Thank you.
Great. The next regularly scheduled meeting for the Historic Preservation Commission, it will be November 12th, 2019 at 9 a.m. Is there any other new business anyone would like to raise? Hearing none, we will declare this meeting adjourned at approximately 10:15 a.m. Thank you all.